"Don't you dare come back," my husband of 20 years yelled, slamming his hand on the table, all because I said I wanted to help our granddaughter who had broken her arm. For 20 years, I had followed him in everything. And in the end, what did I get for it? Where else could you go but this house? This time, I didn't argue, but I also didn't stay. He called me irrational, said I was overreacting. He said I couldn't leave without his permission. But deep down I knew. It wasn't just about the child, it was about me reclaiming the right to make decisions about my own life. That morning, I had cleaned the house from top to bottom. I was hanging the last towel on the clothesline, ready to make a cup of tea and rest, when the phone rang. Robbie's name lit up the screen. My heart sank. My daughter isn't the type to call out of the blue, especially not on a weekday afternoon. She works as a school counselor, always rushing, barely a moment to breathe. I picked up the phone immediately. "Mom," she said, her voice laced with worry, "Jewel got hurt at school." My fingers went numb. The cup almost slipped from my hand. What happened? Where is she? Is it bad? Robbie took a deep breath, but her words still tumbled out, shaky. It was during the field day at school. She fell off the monkey bars. The doctor says she fractured her forearm. They put a cast on her. She's fine now, but she'll have to stay home for a few weeks. She can't attend classes. I closed my eyes. My knuckles tightened against the edge of the counter. She's in a lot of pain. Robbie was silent for a few seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "She keeps asking for you," she said. "If Grandma Virgie were here, she'd tell me stories until I fall asleep. Then it wouldn't hurt so much." My eyes burned. Jewel is my only granddaughter, and since her birth, she had been my softest spot. No matter how busy I was, I always made time for her, even if it was just a quick video call. "Should I come?" I asked without hesitation. "I didn't want to bother you." She paused, and when she resumed, there was a hint of bitterness in her voice. "But I really can't take any days off right now. End-of-year evaluations are coming up. If I miss too many days, it could affect my contract renewal for next year." I understand. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "I'll be there tomorrow morning, don't worry." As soon as I hung up, I was already planning the route in my head and packing my bag. It was about a 5-hour drive to Robbie's house. Far, but doable. If I left early, I could arrive before lunch. I began taking clothes from the closet when I heard heavy footsteps on the living room floor. Thurman's voice followed, hoarse and impatient as always. "What are you doing? Dinner won't cook itself." I turned to look at him. Hesitated a moment before deciding not to beat around the bush. Robbie called. "Jewel got hurt. She broke her arm." He came closer, his brow furrowed like thick ropes. "And what about it? Can't her mother take care of her?" I replied softly. "Robbie is very busy with work. She can't take time off right now. I plan to help her for a few days." It was like lighting a fuse. Thurman exploded. "You're leaving, and what about me? Who's going to cook? Who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to remind me to take my medication?" His words were quick and sharp, as if I had announced a luxury cruise instead of saying I'd care for our injured granddaughter. "Thurman, she's my granddaughter. She needs me now. You'll manage for a few days. Order takeout and eat some frozen meals. The house won't fall apart without me." He looked at me, dumbfounded, as if I had just confessed infidelity. "It's just a broken arm. Kids fall all the time. What's so special about it?" I could hardly believe the words coming out of his mouth. "She's 9 years old," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "And you're a 68-year-old man. If you can't survive a few days without me, the problem isn't my absence, but that you never learned to take care of yourself." He slammed his hand so hard on the armchair armrest that it echoed. "Go through that door and don't come back." I stood there, listening to his angry footsteps retreat to the living room, where the television was turned up to full volume, as if it were some kind of power play. But all I could hear was Jewel's voice sobbing on the phone. "Grandma, are you really coming?" I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my half-packed duffel bag. And then I understood. These last 20 years, I had spent upholding the illusion of a blended family. I cooked, cleaned, endured Thurman's moods, tolerated the cold indifference of his son Dewey. I even organized their damned Thanksgiving dinners, as if I were some kind of unpaid event planner. Also, this marriage would feel like a home. But the only people who truly saw me as family were Robbie and Jewel. I looked at the rough lines in my palm, the marks of a life dedicated to giving, so much affection, so much effort invested in everyone else. Perhaps it was time now to give some of that affection back to myself. Perhaps it was time I started showing myself some respect. After that night, the house fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The next morning at 6 a.m., I was already awake. The sky outside was still dark, and the whole place was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I crept downstairs to prepare a simple breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a pot of Thurman's favorite black coffee. I knew he liked to sleep late, but I still wanted to keep the peace before I left. After breakfast was served, I went back upstairs and began packing. A few changes of clothes, some medications, and a handful of Jewel's favorite storybooks. Every item carefully folded and tucked into my duffel bag. My hands were tender, but my heart beat stronger with each movement. Just as I closed the duffel bag, the bedroom door opened. Thurman stepped in, a storm cloud on his face. "Are you really going through with this?" His tone was no longer as angry as yesterday. It was colder, sharper, and more mocking. "You're just going to leave me like that?" I took a deep breath. "I'll make sure everything is ready for you today. I'm driving to Robbie's house tonight. Jewel needs someone to take care of her." He placed the coffee cup on the nightstand with a clatter, his voice hardening. "We talked about this. While you're playing grandma, who's going to take care of me?" "Thurman, I've prepared food for you and organized your medication into daily boxes. You just need to take them on time." My voice remained calm, but the underlying firmness was unmistakable. "I'm going. I have to do this." He looked at me as if I had become something he could no longer control, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "You're really going to abandon me for your daughter's minor injury? I'm your husband, Virgie. Do you have any idea how much my stomach hurt last night?" I looked at him without blinking. "You ate 3 steaks and 2 beers. Your stomach doesn't hurt because you're sick. It hurts because you treat your body like a garbage can." His face turned red as if I had slapped him. His voice trembled with rage. "Now you're talking back to me." "I'm not talking back," I said calmly. "I'm explaining. I'm not your nurse. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. If you walk through that door," he snapped, "you don't need to come back." The coffee cup flew from the nightstand and shattered on the floor. The porcelain shards glided across the wood like small, sharp accusations, echoing in the morning silence. I didn't respond. I simply knelt and picked up the shards one by one, careful not to cut myself. He didn't say another word that evening. I continued to prepare dinner. I continued to prepare his pills. He slouched on the sofa, faking a cough so severe it sounded like he was taking his last breath. I looked at him, drying my hands on a dish towel, and asked, "Should I call 911?" He stopped coughing. I finished washing the dishes, wiped the countertops, and went back upstairs for one last check. As I zipped up my duffel bag, I heard voices in the living room. I hadn't closed the door. He was on the phone. I didn't try to eavesdrop, but the words hit me like stones. Her family isn't important anymore. Now it's all about her daughter. I froze behind the door. "I told you, Dewey. She's only here for a roof over her head, for stability. I'm all she has. But if she goes through with this, she can forget about coming back." Then Dewey's voice, calm but clear. "Dad, don't you dare leave her any of your money. If she walks out today to help her granddaughter, you'll suddenly be handing all your life savings to your daughter." "You're right. Don't worry, I have everything in my name, the house, the accounts. She doesn't even know. And honestly, if she can't understand that, why the hell should I trust her to manage anything?" There was a sharp, amused tone in his voice, as if he were talking about an oblivious stranger, not the woman he had shared 20 years of his life with. In that moment, Something within me grew cold and still. I went back into the bedroom and closed my duffel bag. The sound was soft, almost reverent, like the closing of a coffin. His words kept echoing in my head. This is how he sees me.
I'm not a partner.
I'm not family, just a domestic worker, a housekeeper with emotional benefits, a woman who exchanged her kindness and labor for the illusion of belonging. Love, that was never part of the deal. What had I really been holding onto all these years? A place where I was needed but never respected. A house full of cold air and televisions louder than conversations. A man who called me too sensitive when I was sick. A stepson who never spoke to me unless something needed to be done. A husband who boasted about keeping me out of all facts and accounts, as if it were a clever trick, a marriage where I was never truly seen. I sighed long and softly and stood up. Outside, the wind brushed against the window panes, making the door creak softly. It sounded as if the wind itself was whispering, "It's time. It's time to choose another path." I picked up the phone and dialed a number. A few seconds later, Catherine's voice, still sleepy. "Virgie, are you still awake?" I leaned against the wall and whispered, "I'm going to Robbie's house. Jewel is hurt. She needs me." She paused. "You mean tonight, right now?" "Yes. I've been thinking about it all day."
Sermon was furious.
He said I couldn't leave without his permission. That just made me realize my life here was a joke. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a certain firmness. I don't want to wait any longer. Jewel is waiting for me. I don't want to wake up tomorrow in this house that seems to have no breath. There was a short silence on the other end, then she chuckled softly. "Finally, you're fighting back. You're making a decision for yourself, and you don't need anyone's approval for it." Her voice had warmth, a hint of pride, and almost relief. "You don't owe anyone anything. Go and don't look back." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "As soon as you're at Robbie's, text me, and if anything happens on my end, you'll be the first to know." I promised I would. When the call ended, something inside me felt liberated, as if a heavy lock had been removed from my chest. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my car keys, slung my duffel bag over my shoulder, and walked downstairs without looking back. Thurman was already asleep. The living room was pitch dark. I didn't turn on a light, didn't leave a note. This wasn't an escape, it was a departure to the people who truly mattered, to the version of myself I wanted to be. I drove onto the highway. The night was clear, the road long and straight like an open invitation. I turned on the radio. A 70s singer sang something soft but powerful. I didn't bother to change the station or make calls. I sent Robbie a quick text. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." And then I drove. I thought of Jewel's small face, her casted arm, and her voice in my ear. "Grandma, if you come, it won't hurt anymore." My eyes burned. It wasn't about escape. It was about doing something meaningful, being there for a child who truly needed me. 5 hours later, I reached Robbie's driveway. I was tired, but my spirit was steadfast. I breathed in the fresh morning air deeply. The front door practically flew open as soon as I parked. Jewel shot out like a startled little bird. "Grandma!" she cried, holding up her casted arm as she ran towards me. I rushed forward, bent down, and caught her in my arms. She buried her face in my neck, breathless, as if afraid I would disappear again. "You really came," she sobbed. Her voice as soft as a feather. "Mommy said you would, but I thought maybe they wouldn't let you." My heart squeezed. "If Grandma Virgie says she's coming, I murmured, patting her back gently. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. Jewel lay curled on the sofa, her left arm in a thick white cast, her small face buried under a rainbow blanket, finding much-needed rest. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup, casting quiet glances at her from a distance, careful not to disturb the rare tranquility that had settled over the house. Robbie sat opposite me, on a work call. Her phone leaned against the teapot, the screen glowing with a colleague's name. She listened, nodded, then silently mouthed thank you to me. I just shook my head and smiled. It wasn't hard at all. Compared to the last 20 years, I had never felt so at ease. The morning I arrived, Robbie didn't say much. She simply hugged me, took my bag, and led me to the kitchen. "Coffee or tea?" she asked.
Coffee, please.
As she poured, she said, she barely slept last night, woke up crying twice. The doctor says we need to watch her closely. With little ones, they always worry about bones not healing evenly. My heart ached. "I'll take care of her. You go to work. We'll handle the shifts when you get home." Robbie handed me the cup. "Thank you, Mom. Having you here makes a difference." Neither of us went out that day. I helped Jewel change and arranged pillows under her arm so she was comfortable. She tried to be brave, holding back tears, but when I opened one of her favorite books and read a few pages, I finally saw a slight smile at the corners of her mouth. "Grandma," she whispered, leaning against me, "can you live here forever?" I kissed her forehead. Her eyelashes fanned out in the sunlight like tiny wings. "Would you like me to stay?" I asked. She nodded. "When you're here, Mom's not as stressed, and I feel better too." I couldn't answer her immediately because she was right, and because it had been so long since I'd felt not just needed but wanted. Thurman always said he needed me, but he never truly saw me. He never respected what I gave him. He needed someone to prop him up, not a woman with thoughts, feelings, and a life outside his living room. But Jewel, Robbie, they made me feel needed, seen, welcome, appreciated. After lunch, Jewel leaned back on a small sun-drenched sofa by the window, and I stirred a pot of pumpkin soup in the kitchen. The breeze outside gently swayed the trees, and birdsong drifted through the branches. Robbie came in and handed me a drawing Jewel had made. 3 stick figures holding hands. In the middle, a girl with round cheeks and round glasses. On one side her mother, on the other, a woman with an apron. She said, "This is a family of 3 under the sun," Robbie said with a smile. I took the drawing, and something inside me softened, as if my heart had just been wrapped in a warm cloth. "She also said you're stronger than a superhero," Robbie added softly. "You used to say that too." I chuckled. Robbie sat next to me and paused before her voice softened. "Mom, if you ever, want to stay here forever, I wouldn't mind." "Really?" I looked up, surprised. "I'm not saying you have to," she quickly added. "Only if you feel better here, safer. You don't have to cling to that other house anymore." I held the drawing with both hands and looked out the window where the wind chimes swayed gently, unable to speak immediately. That evening, I helped Jewel wash her face, put on her pajamas, and settled her casted arm on a stack of soft pillows. "Grandma," she asked me as I tucked her in, "are you sleeping here tonight too?" "Of course. Once your arm heals, I might consider giving you your room back." She laughed. "Grandma," she repeated, "don't stop coming." "Okay." I leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "As long as you need me, I'm here." After she fell asleep, I quietly slipped out. Robbie had also fallen asleep, still in her work clothes, curled up in her bed. I covered her shoulders with a blanket before returning to the guest room. There I lay, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts raced relentlessly, and then I understood. This was the life I wanted. Not a spotless kitchen, not a perfectly organized living room, not a man who only served me coffee because he said so. What I wanted was for someone to call me Mom. A little girl who said, "It's okay when Grandma is here." I am no one's servant. I am a mother, a grandmother, a woman who is still very much alive, still very much loved. The wind streamed through the open window, and the night enveloped me like a thick, warm blanket. I closed my eyes and told myself, it's time to think about life in a new place. Robbie had gone to work, and Jewel was still asleep upstairs. I sat alone at the kitchen table as the morning sun cast long golden lines on the floor. The house was so quiet it felt almost sacred. For the first time in my life, I felt safe sitting in someone else's kitchen. There were no demands, no loud orders. No, "Have you made breakfast yet?" No, "Where are my pills?" I carefully lifted the coffee cup Robbie had left for me. But before I could take a sip, my eyes fell on a stack of papers in the corner of the table. It looked like Robbie's files, receipts, folders, maybe something she had been looking through last night. I reached out and casually flipped through them, and then I paused. There was a faded photocopy of an old draft agreement. The title read, Proposal for Post-Marital Asset Management, Draft. I frowned. I read on. It outlined a policy of shared family contributions and stipulated that all real estate and substantial financial assets would remain in the name of the original owner, with an important note to exclude Virgie's biological daughter and her descendants. The more I read, the colder my hands became. Thurman had never let me handle the finances. Whenever I asked, he brushed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And I believed him. I believed we were partners. I believed that what was his was mine too. I believed he would treat my daughter as I had foolishly tried to treat his son Dewey. But this document, this language, screamed what he never had the decency to say aloud, "You are nothing." When Robbie came home for lunch, I showed it to her. She glanced at it and let out a long sigh. "I've wanted to tell you for a long time, Mom. He came here with Dewey that year. He said he wanted to clarify everyone's roles and responsibilities, especially regarding aging and care. But when I saw this document, I knew. He never saw you as part of the family." "Why didn't you tell me then?" Robbie's voice dropped. "Because you wouldn't have heard it then. You probably would have said something like, 'It's very considerate of Thurman to think ahead.' I didn't want to break your heart. I still hoped you would be happy."
I leaned back in my chair, my head pounding.
"Mom," she said softly, "you need to protect yourself." She hesitated a moment and added, "Catherine called me last week. She said you should talk to a lawyer. She gave me someone's contact information." I looked up. "I want to meet her." That afternoon, Catherine met me at a small cafe on the outskirts of town and handed me a business card across the table. The cafe was small, but as soon as I sat down, I felt like the world had opened up. Catherine looked the same, sharp and sensible, but her tone was friendlier than usual. "Virgie, you've spoken out," she smiled. "This is Althea Hill. She's been working in asset division and legal aid for women for over 20 years. She's the right person for what you're facing." At first, I didn't even look at the card. I just looked at Catherine. "Have you suspected Thurman for a while?" She didn't lie. "You're my best friend. I've seen how exhausted and invisible you've felt all these years, but you didn't want to hear it. And if you're not ready to listen, there's not much to say." I looked down. Finally, I took the card and nodded. "I'm ready now." 2 days later, I entered Althea Hill's office. She was in her mid-50s. She wore a neutral suit, had penetrating eyes, and a firm voice. I told her everything, how Thurman controlled the finances, how Dewey had always kept his distance, how we had no joint accounts or joint property, how my name never appeared on a single important document. She took notes in silence, then closed her notebook. "Virgie, after what you've shared, you have the right to petition for the division of marital assets. A 20-year marriage with long-term care duties entitles you to make a claim." My heart pounded, but I didn't earn much money. I worked in a hospital, but after I quit, I only cooked, cleaned, took him to doctor's appointments. She looked me directly in the eyes. "That's called contribution, not unpaid labor. And yes, the courts recognize that." I froze. No one had called it that before. She continued. "We'll start with a review of the financial assets in Thurman's name. Real estate, investments, account balances. Then we'll determine authorization rights and estimate the total value. I'll help you secure evidence and initiate the process discreetly, without raising alarm." I nodded slowly. My voice was calm, but confident. "I'm not taking crumbs anymore." Althea smiled. "Then let's not wait any longer. Let's begin." As I left the firm, the sky had darkened. I stood on the street corner. The wind tugged at the hem of my coat. I didn't pull it tight. Instead, I looked at the fading sunset. And I knew it. I had spent too many years fearing the consequences, being difficult, being seen as the unruly wife. So I stayed quiet and inconspicuous, thinking it was safer, but I was done with that. This wasn't a rebellion, it was the reclamation of dignity. Back in my car, I sent Robbie a single text message. "I've made a decision.
I'm divorcing Turman.
We had just finished dinner that evening. Jewel had gone to her room to rest, and Robbie was still washing dishes in the kitchen. Then, out of nowhere, there was a knock at the door, not gentle. It was a series of loud, fast, almost violent thumps, more like fists beating against the door than a doorbell. Robbie froze, the dish towel still in her hand. Instinctively, I went to Jewel's room and carefully closed the door before going to the front. As soon as I opened it, I saw Thurman standing on the porch, his face like a thundercloud. Behind him stood Dewey, hands in his pockets, with a blank expression. "How long do you plan to hide here?" Thurman asked quietly, condescendingly. I said nothing. One hand rested on the doorframe as I stared at him. "You've ignored my calls for a week. No message, not a single word. You just ran off to your daughter's house and played house." His voice was calm but full of rage, as if every word was dipped in gasoline. I didn't bat an eye. I simply asked, "What are you doing here?" Dewey stepped forward, feigning concern. "Dad just wants to talk. He's worried. It's not safe for you to be alone here." I laughed briefly, without humor. Right, because being in a house with my daughter and granddaughter is clearly more dangerous than living in a house full of emotional blackmail. Thurman narrowed his eyes. He hadn't expected me to defend myself. "You've lost your mind," he snarled. "We've been married 20 years, and now you just leave and then, behind my back, hire a lawyer to file for divorce." Robbie appeared in the hallway, drying her hands on a towel. She stepped beside me. "Is this your wife, Thurman?" "No, your maid," he said coldly. "If she really mattered to you, you wouldn't have told her she couldn't leave when her family needed her." Thurman's face turned red. That was something I said in anger. Robbie didn't bat an eye. "And we've heard enough of your heat of the moment over the years. From the day you joined this family, you never knew how to show affection like a decent human being." Dewey interrupted, annoyed. "This isn't helping. You're just trying to complicate things. My father isn't well. You can't keep stressing him out like this." I looked at them both. My voice calm and sharp. "Thurman, I gave you opportunities. I told you why I had to leave. I prepared your meals, your pills. I explained everything to you. I didn't just disappear. You chose not to listen to me. And now you're here, thinking you can force me back under your control." Thurman's mouth twisted, jaw tightening, before he barked, "All right. Go if you want, but don't expect a dime. The house, the accounts, everything is in my name. You won't get a single stone." A door creaked open behind us. Jewel. I saw her small eyes peeking through the crack, scared. Robbie quickly turned around. "Jewel, darling, everything's fine. Go back to bed.
I'll be right here."
I turned back to Thurman, firm and unfazed. "You're no longer the one who can silence me. I'm handling this legally now. If you don't want to further embarrass yourself in front of a judge, I suggest you turn around and leave." Dewey mumbled, "She's been planning this all along." I looked at him with a steely gaze. "Don't pretend this is about anything other than your father's money. I owe neither of you anything." Thurman stared at me for a long time, his eyes full of rage. Then he snapped, "You'll regret this." He stormed off the porch. Each step was like a landmine. Dewey followed him, but not before turning to give me a look, something between a threat and resentment. I closed the door behind them and turned the key with a soft click. Robbie exhaled next to me. "Are you okay, Mom?" I didn't answer. Instead, I went to Jewel's room, switched on the dimmed lamp beside her bed, and sat next to her. Her eyes were moist. "Did he yell at you?" she whispered. I took her small hand and squeezed it gently. "No," I said softly. "He just doesn't know how to talk to me anymore, and this time, I didn't let him." She nodded, not fully understanding, but understanding enough. "You're not leaving, are you?" she asked. I smiled and tucked the blanket under her chin. "Your grandma worked so hard to reclaim her life. Now that I'm here, darling, I'm not going anywhere." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, listening to the soft sounds of Robbie tidying the kitchen and the wind chimes outside, swaying gently. It sounded like a celebration, like freedom. I was no longer the woman who swallowed her words. Thurman said I would regret it, but deep down I knew. The only one who should regret it was never me. After that day, Thurman never knocked on the door again, but I knew it wasn't over. A few days later, Althea called me. She said Thurman had hired a private lawyer and sent his first official response. It wasn't aggressive, but the tone made it clear. They were testing to see if I would misbehave or if I was serious. I sat in Robbie's living room, folding Jules' laundry, while Althea explained every possible legal strategy to me over the phone. They will try to portray her as emotional and unstable, she warned in a firm voice, because it's easier then for a judge to favor Thurman in the asset division. But we won't let that happen. Her way of saying it, calm, determined, reminded me of the voice I had when I fought for my patients' rights in the hospital. It had been so long since someone had spoken for me like that. That afternoon, Catherine took me to a women's rights forum held at the downtown community library. At first, I didn't want to go. I wasn't used to discussing my personal affairs in public, and I believed I had nothing to say that hadn't been said 100 times before. But as I sat there, surrounded by middle-aged women whose faces seemed both strange and familiar, I began to see my past reflected within myself, layer by layer of pain. Some spoke of how they were treated as de facto partners rather than wives. Others told stories of how they were financially impacted after their husbands' deaths when they found they had no legal right to their homes. One woman spoke of her adult children who treated her as a free babysitter and walking ATM. The more I listened, the tighter my throat became. Catherine leaned over and handed me a tissue with a warm smile. "Would you like to share your story?" At first, I shook my head, but then the host turned to the group and asked, "Would anyone like to talk about what's happening right now?" I stood up. At first, my voice trembled, but I forced myself to stand tall. "My name is Virgie. I'm 65 years old. I've been married to my current husband for 20 years. I did almost everything in the house because he never hired help. He didn't need any. He had me." Some women laughed and nodded in agreement. I never complained. Not even when his son ignored me, not even when my name never appeared on an account. I thought that's what marriage meant. I paused. I took a deep breath. Then my granddaughter broke her arm, and I decided to take care of her. He looked at me and said, "If you walk through that door, don't come back." In that moment, I realized, I am not a piece of furniture, I am not a supporting character in his life. I am a mother, I am a grandmother, and I am myself. The room fell silent, then applause erupted, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't crying. I was smiling from a deep, honest, and vibrant place. When I got home, Robbie and I began to organize my financial documents. We contacted banks, tracked down transactions, and gathered all joint accounts I might have been passively connected to. Althea issued a formal letter demanding a partial account freeze and a full review of his assets. "You haven't given up your rights," she reminded me. "They can't erase you." Just in time, Thurman sent a handwritten note included in his lawyer's response. 2 pages. It began with "You're crazy," and ended with "You are ungrateful." The last line read, "You had it better than most women. Why can't you just be content?" I folded the letter and laughed a short, bitter laugh. Robbie read it and said, "That's the problem. He believes everything you had was a gift from him." I nodded. "And that's why I need to show him that I'm not begging. I'm demanding what's mine." That evening, I opened my notebook and began to draft a will. Thurman's name was not in it. I wrote Robbie and Jules' names, selected their shares, and bequeathed the rest to the local women's shelter and the volunteer medical program where I once worked. I wanted to leave a clear imprint of the life I had lived, not as someone's wife, not as someone's stepmother, but as a woman who chose to rewrite her story. As I closed the notebook, the wind chimes at the window moved gently. I stood up and looked out, watching the delicate metal pieces dance in the wind. No one controlled my windows anymore. No one told me what I could or couldn't decide. For the first time, I owed no one anything. That day, I returned to Thurman's house for the last time. I didn't bring much, just the legal documents, Althea's written authorization, and a simple list I had made of the personal items I still had there. Althea offered to come with me, but I declined. I need to do this myself, I told her. I want him to see the woman he can no longer control. The house looked the same. The porch was neat, the lawn as manicured as ever, but as I approached, none of it felt like home anymore. I rang the doorbell, and the door opened seconds later. Thurman stood on the porch, wrapped in a heavy coat, his hair grayer and more disheveled than I remembered, his eyes restless in that familiar, agitated way. He didn't carry anything. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me as if there were 1,000 things he wanted to say, but couldn't say any of them. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly. "You moved out a while ago." "And I?" His voice trailed off, his gaze lowered, his fingers trembling slightly. "I just wanted to see if you were doing okay." I didn't answer immediately. I stepped aside but didn't invite him in. He looked up, his voice softer than usual. "Is there really a way for things to go back to how they were?" I looked at him for a long time, letting the question hang between us. "Thurman, we're divorced. What exactly do you expect to find here?" He flinched, as if he hadn't been prepared for the honesty. "You lived in this house for so many years. I still think you should what?" I interrupted calmly. "Continue cooking, doing your laundry, picking up your medication, reminding you of doctor's appointments, as if I owed it to you." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I didn't betray you, Thurman," I continued. "I left someone who never valued me. That's the clearest decision I've made in my life." He turned his head as if something had hit him directly in the chest. And then came the silence, the kind of silence that follows the first crack in a long frozen lake. "I'm just getting old. I don't know what to do anymore," he finally said, his voice trembling like a man lost in his own life. I breathed slowly and nodded. "Then you should call your doctor or your friends or Dewey, but not me." Something flashed in his eyes. Resentment, sadness, but he didn't defend himself. "Are you really happy now?" he asked. I looked him in the eyes and said, clearly and honestly, "Yes, I am." Thurman nodded slowly. As he turned to go down the steps, his movements were somewhat unsteady. I didn't see him out. I stood at the door for a while, watching him get into his car and drive down the street. The engine silenced at the corner. When I finally closed the door, it felt like sealing a window that had been open for 20 years and no longer needed to be. A few days later, I officially began my volunteer work at the Children's Health Clinic in Robbiestown. 2 days a week, I helped with basic health checkups and ran a program called Grandma's Class, teaching small children the basics of self-care, healthy eating, and emotional awareness. That first morning, standing in front of a classroom full of perfectly seated first graders, I felt a pang of nervousness. But by the end of that first session, watching those small, curious faces, with their eager hands asking questions, something deep inside me exhaled, because I realized I hadn't lost my value. I had just found a place where my voice was finally heard. That Thanksgiving, we didn't invite anyone, just the 3 of us, Robbie, Jewel, and me. We set the table with 3 place settings. On the wall next to the dining table, we taped Jewel's crayon drawing, "Family Under the Sun," where we all held hands under a brightly yellow sky. As we raised our glasses, Jewel solemnly said, "I'm so thankful that Grandma is always here." I looked at her, then at Robbie, and said softly, "I'm so thankful that for the first time, I'm not just being used to hold life together, but truly invited to be a part of it." After dinner, Jewel returned to her crayons while Robbie and I cleaned up the kitchen. I reached into the cabinet and took out the labeled box containing my updated will, medical directives, and emergency contact cards. I handed it to her. "Mom, what is this?" she asked. "That's my plan," I said after a pause. "I don't want anyone else making decisions for me after this. I want to leave you something clear and simple, and perhaps even some space." She didn't take the box. Instead, she took my hand. "You were never a burden," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You were always a role model." I smiled and blinked, trying to hold back the warmth in my eyes. That evening, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the streetlights come on. One by one, the wind chimes at the door made a gentle metallic sound. I looked down and saw a new sticker Jewel had added. It read, "Grandma's hands never let go." I reached out and traced my fingers over the edges of the sticker, whispering, "That's right, darling. Not this time. This time I wouldn't let go, because this life, this chapter, this voice, this home in the end belonged to me."